Hello and welcome to episode 13 of LionWing Talks, a weekly show dedicated to all things LionWing, where we talk about LionWing games, LionWing news, LionWing future games, give project updates, I answer community questions, and then we just talk about other stuff too. Sometimes it's about localization, sometimes it's about Japanese games, oftentimes it's about tabletop games. I'm your host, Bradley Hailstorm, founder and president of LionWing, and wow, do we have a stacked show tonight. So not only did I get a record number of listeners submitted questions, but we've got some big news to share about Gun and Gun. More specifically about our first Gun and Gun event, which will be a tournament. I'll talk about that during the project updates section. So if you've been following along with the show, you know that I follow a format. I start the show off with this little introduction. Then we move into our Q&A, where I go over our listener-supported questions, or our listener-submitted questions, answer those. Then we move into our project updates section, and then we close the show out. So the project updates tonight will mostly be focused on Gun and Gun, but I've got a little bit of Wild Hunt Festival news. I've got a little bit of Embryo Machine news. No news on Testament, but we'll get to that. Still, quite a bit of content in tonight's episode. I'm really excited for what we're going to be talking about tonight. This one will not go 60 minutes, I promise you. So oftentimes I say that we're going to go about an hour, or I'll say like, oh, we got a short one tonight. We're going to probably get in, under an hour. No, that's not tonight's show. This one will definitely be going long. Probably more on the 90-minute side. As I said, I think that's sort of the time slot that I've been allotted by fate. 90 minutes. As much as I would love to be able to get through it in 60, it just doesn't happen. Tonight, it's definitely not going to happen. So, without any further ado, let's get to this. Although someone is saying that the intro didn't play. Hopefully the intro did play. That would be a bummer if it didn't. And it certainly would be awkward, because then I would just be sitting there sort of without music, and that is uncomfortable. Okay, so let's get to our questions. Like I said, we've got 19 of them. Better get going. The first question: can you give us another hint about the next project? So, if you're not if you are not a part of the Discord, then you missed I'll call it a soft reveal, more of a hint than anything about our upcoming summer Kickstarter. I revealed that information on I think that was Monday. So just a few days ago. If you've followed along with any of the previous LionWing projects and you're in the Discord, you know that I typically like to do a little something fun before I officially reveal the next game. And that is, I always throw up sort of the project code name, the name that we use behind the scenes often when talking about our next project. I give all projects code names. I come from the video games localization world, where that is a very normal practice, and so I just carried it over to LionWing, and it turns out that it's kind of a fun thing to do in the Discord, because in the Discord we've got all of our channels along the left hand side, and I'll usually throw up the project name, give it its own channel, and it's an opportunity for folks to try to figure out what the next project might be. So I revealed that project name on Monday, Project Royal, and we've had folks throwing out some guesses as to what they think Project Royal might be in reference to. No one's got it right so far. So there is another project coming. There's a bit of news if you're not in the Discord. That project is coming in June-ish right now. I don't have a firm launch date just yet, but June-ish, definitely. I'm just calling it the summer Kickstarter because it's easier. And that way I don't have to commit to anything too early. It'll be coming soon, though. And so this question is in reference to if I can give any further hints about what the project might be outside of that code name of Project Royal. So sure, I'll give another hint. The game uses cards, but it's not a card game. So there you have it. Question number 2, can we expect more battle card games from LionWing, or is Gun and Gun it for you? Well, I would say that Gun and Gun's not the only one we have, because we have Embryo Machine as well. It's a different kind of battle card game that uses movement and, game pieces, but it's pretty much a battle card game. So it's not just Gun and Gun. Anyway, your question, yes, indeed. Though I can't yet say when that'll happen. But over the next, let's say, this is a little arbitrary, but it gets in the right ballpark, I think. Let's say over the next 18-ish months, we will be revealing, launching another battle card game project. At least one. There might be more than that. I don't know. So if you're looking to get your LionWing battle card game fix and you want to extend that beyond Gun and Gun and Embryo Machine, well, you're in luck because that'll be happening. Next question. Kind of a silly question. How do you like your coffee? Trust me, it's important. How do I like my coffee? Well, I like flat white. But if I want basically a milkshake with coffee, I'm going to stop at Dunkin' Donuts and I'm going to grab myself a small caramel frozen coffee, no whip. That's what I'm gonna go with, which is kind of like cheating because like a frozen coffee, essentially a frappuccino, is not real coffee. That's, like I said, it's the milkshake of coffees. But a flat white is most definitely coffee and it's delicious. If I really have to, a latte is fine. I like caramel in my coffee, so caramel lattes, good stuff. I'm monitoring the chat. I see someone here. This is about Project Royal. They said JP release year as a hint, maybe. Sure. They're not tonight. Sin in the chat says, I actually drink my coffee black or with a splash of milk. Yeah, so I like flat whites because there's a perfect balance of coffee and milk or creamer. It hits the spot for me. All right, question 4. So those are kind of like those are the soft questions, the introductory questions. Now we get into some heavier questions that require longer answers, I guess. When juggling multiple projects, how do you split your focus? So I have project days on the games that we're actively developing. So at one point, I had a day specifically dedicated to Wild Hunt Festival and a day specifically dedicated to Gun and Gun. And I guess actually there was a very, very brief time when we were still doing some Kickstarter stuff for Testament. And so I gave Testament like a half day at that point. Testament was mostly done at that point, but we had to, finish up the Kickstarter extras. So this was like end of Q1 of 2020, early Q2 2020, when we were working like on all 3 of those projects. But when I'm in active development, I always give specific days, at least one to each project. And then the other days, I sort of just kind of tackle each project as I see fit. But I make sure that every project at least gets a full day where I'm doing nothing else other than working on that project. But most of the time, I mean, up until recently, most of the time I would have enough space in my schedule because we didn't have a ton of projects where I was able to dedicate, 2 days per project, especially when we were just working on, there was a time when we were just working on Testament and Wild Hunt Festival. And then we added Gun and Gun, and so that's why there was kind of an overlap with all 3 of those for a moment. But still, dedicated days are very important. And you have to have a priority list, and you have to have a roadmap. I talked about in last week's episode, one of the ways that I maintain good team morale and ensuring that I don't burn people out, sort of weighing like staff versus product, is I make sure that I have a roadmap and that I have milestones along the way. And each of those milestones along the way have a target date. And so having a date, having it in visual form, for me, I'm a visual person. I need to see the thing. It can't just be floating around sort of nebulously in my head, because then I lose track of stuff. I've got to have it written down. When I've got it written down and I've got my roadmap with my milestones and my target dates, then I'm able to keep track of all of the moving parts of every project. And that way I can sort of jump in and jump out on those non-specified days to say, all right, so I don't have this day isn't strictly dedicated to any one game. So let me look at my roadmaps here. What do I need to tackle? Like what is my priority? What should I prioritize today? So it's a juggling act, though, certainly, especially when you are as involved in the project development as I am. most of the projects, I'm pretty heavily involved in some manner. It might be the editing, it might be the proofing, it might just be project oversight. With Testament, there was a lot of creative direction. So it sort of depends on my level of participation in that project, but pretty much every project I've been really, really involved in. Now, Embryo Machine was probably the project that I was the least involved in, but I was still heavily involved in Embryo Machine as well, which just goes to show how much I was truly involved with all the projects that came before it. It was sort of to an unhealthy level, especially Testament, just because I wore like 4 different hats throughout Testament's development. I never want to go back to that. I was burning the candle at both ends. That was no good. So, you really have to balance out your schedule to ensure that you're keeping yourself sane while at the same time making sure that every project that you've got going on is getting the care and the attention that it deserves. It's not in me to work on one project at the expense of another one. I'll never do that. If I get to that point, then I'm doing this all wrong, because every project, especially a project that goes to Kickstarter where people are pledging their hard-earned money up front, I'm making sure that no matter where in the release schedule that project lands, that it's getting just as much attention as all the ones that's come before it. Now, certainly there are times, and this speaks to the specific days, where I'll need to work on something. I'll need to prioritize a game that week over another one. But it all sort of balances itself out in the end, because I am creating sort of a roadmap for myself and comparing those roadmaps to each project to make sure that there's enough time in the allotted release schedule and in the development schedule that I can target every game in the way that it needs to be targeted. So that's really important to me. I want to make sure that all the games get the love and care that they need, while also making sure that I hit all of my milestones and my deadlines. It's a delicate dance, I'll tell you what, especially once you get into like the 4, 5, 6 simultaneous project kind of range. That's when like your planning has to be on point. You can't get lazy when you've got that many projects happening at once. Especially when most of those are in active development. You have to be on top of your game to ensure that you're producing the best game for your audience. It gets a little wild though, for sure. Joey in the chat said, darn, joined late and missed your opinion on coffee. Yes, watch the video on playback, though I did talk about flat whites. So that's how I juggle multiple projects, and that's how I split my focus. I also have good teams around me, people who I've worked with now for a long time on multiple projects, whom I trust, whom I know can kind of take the reins for me when my attention is being diverted elsewhere. And that attention may not be diverted to another game. It might be diverted to PR or community management or an interview. Or like the boring back-end financials, tax preparation, because we just went through tax season. I mean, so sometimes my attention gets pulled away from a game, not because of another game, but because of, one of the other, what feels like 100 things that I have to take care of as, the head of a small business. So I make sure that I have people who surround me, who I can not only trust and who are not only confident in their skill set, but very competent in their skill set. But I also want people who recognize the importance of these projects and the importance of getting things right. Because if I have someone who sort of checks all those boxes I just talked about, then I feel pretty good when I have to go elsewhere that the project is in good hands. And like I've said before, at this point, I kind of work with the same folks on most projects, and that works for us because we all know kind of how the other person works, and we know what we can trust the other person with and what we can't. I also like to surround myself, with people who are better than me and who also sort of fill in my gaps, my weaknesses. I never want a team that all sort of has the same skill set and that is all good at the same thing. To me, that's not a good team. And so that applies to me as well, recognizing my own shortcomings, recognizing what I'm not so great at, and making sure that I bring folks on board who are good at that stuff, who that area is not a shortcoming for them, but instead it's an area in which they excel. So, team building and hiring the right person for the job is a super important part of this entire process that never gets talked about. People take for granted that, who the people who are working on the game are, no one really thinks about that aspect unless you're a designer and your name is sort of known because you are a designer. No one thinks about like, oh, who's doing the graphics for this game? Oh, who did the proofing? Who's doing the QA? Who did the localization? Who did the graphics work? Who did the marketing graphics work? Who set up the ads on Facebook? I mean, no one thinks about all of those other players that make a product possible. They just think about the people that are out sort of front and center the most and identify them as the person who's behind that game, becoming a thing and happening. But it's not true. It's a big team. Even for us as a small team, it's a team of folks who make these products happen. So, all right. Question 5. How do you feel the pandemic has affected the tabletop industry and interest in the medium? Yeah, I think the pandemic has shredded one of the key ways that people find games, demo games, buy games, support publishers and designers. And I think it's shredded the key way that publishers and designers show their games, demo their games, sell their games, and make money enough to make the next game. And what I'm talking about there is conventions. This industry, I won't say lives and dies by conventions, because as we've seen through 2020, we don't live and die by conventions. They're a very, very substantial part of pretty much everyone's business model in this industry. But they, as we have seen now firsthand, they are not the only part of the business model. Still, they're a critical part. And so not having that avenue has really affected the industry in some ways. It's not, if nothing else, it's not allowed as much growth to happen as could have happened had the pandemic never happened. I just said happened a lot in there, but I think you are following along. I would also say outside of that, the pandemic, and this goes to sort of the thing I was just talking about before, where you don't really think about like the other players behind the game. You also don't think about like what the pandemic has done on workflows, target dates, like development milestones, deadlines, release dates, shipping dates, all of that. And it's had a profound impact on nearly everyone's emotional and mental health, which trickles down to the work that they do. And so, yes, the obvious answer to a question like this is like, oh, well, it's affected companies' bottom lines because we no longer can go to conventions. But it's had sort of more subtle, but equally as damaging effects on the people, there we get back to that, behind the games, and how it's affecting those individuals on a human level, on the stress that everyone has felt in 2020, and how that stress has played off of, made worse, compounded things like anxiety or depression, if you were already dealing with those prior to the pandemic hitting. And that inevitably affects one's ability to do their job to the best of their ability. That's just the way it goes. And so, like, the big impact of the pandemic has been on people. Obviously, that answer applies not to this industry, but into the larger context of human existence right now. But certainly, yeah, that's been a huge element of what we've had to sort of wrestle with when it comes to making games in a pandemic environment. It's weird, and plus, like, you have a different way of working because, no one's meeting in person. Now for us, for LionWing, other than the playtesting team, no one's ever met in person because, we've always been a company who have worked with folks from around the globe. And so since day one, we've been sort of a remote company, if you will. But I rely on my playtest team who are local, and we had to come up with some really creative in pretty unoptimal ways of playtesting games last year. It was weird. It was weird, and I never want to go back there again. It was a real pain in the ass. And so the pandemic has really affected this industry in all the obvious ways and the not so obvious ways as well. Seems like, we're pulling the nose up now, but we're still in this thing and it's still going to be around for quite a long time to come. I'm really interested to see what happens with conventions. Some conventions are making a comeback this year with some, limited capacity kinds of setups and whatnot. I'm curious to see how that really plays out. I can't see it going super well for this industry, but who knows? We are in uncharted water. So, yeah, who knows what that will really look like and what it will really mean for the designers, for the publishers, for the players, the customers, and for the industry at large. Let me check the chat here. Someone in the chat said, "I have a good candidate for Project Royal, but it is only coming out right now." Oh, Sai, please share your hypothesis in the chat. I'd love to read it. Real Beans, one of our community leads, says, popped in a little late as well. This industry discussion is honestly really interesting. It's interesting to talk about. It's been very interesting to work through. Very interesting, very challenging. I mean, I said in one of the early episodes of LionWing Talks, like 2020 was a bad year for planet Earth, but it wasn't such a bad year for LionWing. And yet still, it was not an ideal year for a small business. As a small business, sure, we've been around. I mean, we launched our first Kickstarter in 2018, but we didn't fulfill it until April 2019. So at that point, we'd only been around for like 8 months before the pandemic hit, maybe 10 months. It's a weird thing to have to contend with when you're a small business and you're a small business owner like myself, and you're new to the industry as being a publisher, you're new to owning your business, and then the pandemic hits and you have to figure out how to conduct business, which you were already trying to figure out anyway. Now you have to pivot and figure it out in a whole new way, and you have to conceptualize how you run a business completely differently. And I'm not even talking about like, oh, well, you have to work remote now, because that was never really an issue for us. But you've got to think about all the other aspects that have been touched by the pandemic that, if you're not a small business owner, and if you're not a business owner in this industry, you never have to think about. So it was weird. The first 6 months of 2020 were very strange. Just like on the back end of things, of trying to figure out how do we navigate this while also producing games, and like, should we be producing games right now because the world has like bigger problems? And then it's like, well, actually games are a great outlet and like can bring people joy, and that's probably what we all need right now. So very strange year to take part in. Sin in the chat said, I'm super hyped for conventions to finally return. Me too. We've never had a convention presence. 2019, we fulfilled Sinome. We moved into the video game sector for a hot minute and spent the rest of 2019 launching those two games. And then 2020 hit, which was going to be kind of our foray into conventions. The pandemic, slaughters everything in its path, and including conventions. And it's like, okay, well, I guess we're not getting into the convention game this year. I guess we're going to have to look at 2021. 2021's been weird as hell too. So it's like, oh, all right. We're going to be maybe at some conventions this year, but it looks like we're postponing our convention presence, our first real foray into the convention scene in 2022. So I am very, very hype about conventions finally returning, for all of the same reasons that everyone else is, and also for my own selfish reasons to have LionWing have a presence at these conventions, because I do think that's a really important part about growing your brand, about getting eyes on your brand, about people seeing your games, about people being able to meet you in person. It's one thing to connect with you all over this and to connect with you on the Discord or wherever. It's another thing to have you come up to our booth and I see you and you see me, and we talk and we hear each other's voices, not through a microphone. Like, that does a lot. That's really important. I can't wait for that part. Like, I can't wait to meet people who I've talked with through the Discord or wherever, in person for conventions. And so selfishly, I'm excited for conventions because I know it's going to be good for LionWing, but I'm also selfishly excited for conventions because I get to meet people, which is in person, which is something I'm really excited to do. Let's see what I missed here. I think I missed a few things. Real Beans in the chat said the board game store I worked at over the summer has been around, I think, just as long as LionWing. And I think it's really cool how you both have these detailed stories of how you managed to stay afloat during 2020. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I remember when the pandemic was hitting, Testament happened right as or right before the pandemic hit. But, we had a safety net in Japanime. But I remember thinking, like, all right, so I've got Wild Hunt Festival lined up. Do we even go ahead with that? I don't is it even gonna succeed now? Are people even gonna back or be thinking about board games, in June of this year, 3 or 4 months in the pandemic? And so there was just a lot of uncertainty of I don't know if I don't know if I'm going to be able to make this work. I don't know if the conditions of the world are going to allow me to make this work, even if I want it to work. Now, fortunately, I said, no, we're moving ahead. We're going to make this work. And we're going to do the best we can given the situation. And then, like I said, 2020 turned out to be kind of our breakout year. So, yeah, interesting story indeed. Getting back to something Cy talked about, he said he had an idea of what he thought Project Royal might be. And so he's following up and saying the name is in English, has King in the title, and is described as an SRPG meets TCG. You're talking about Kingslayer. Kingslayer, super cool. From what I've seen, I haven't gotten my copy yet from White Rabbit, but it's coming to me along with a bunch of other things. Kingslayer, super, super, super cool. I follow them on Twitter. I really like Kingslayer because I love Summoner Wars, as I've talked about before. And Kingslayer is kind of like a faster, snappier, less involved Summoner Wars, which I love. I think the art of Kingslayer is really rad. It's weird. It's real sketchy looking. It's not very clean, and that's kind of why I dig it. When you juxtapose it with Summoner Wars, especially the Summoner Wars 2.0, if you will, very clean aesthetic. Kingslayer is the opposite. It's rough and dirty and multiple illustrators, and everyone sort of has their own take on, how to illustrate these characters. But the premise of the game is great. The art is really unique. I love the art. Probably not everyone's favorite art, but it's got, if you're old like me, you know what Vagrant Story is for the PS1 that Square Enix produced. It's got a very Vagrant Story kind of feel to its art, to its character design. I love that game. It is a game, I'll just be straight up honest. It's a game I'm very interested in pursuing. I don't know if it would be a Kickstarter project for us. I haven't given it any thought. The most thought I'm giving it is happening right now. I don't know if it would be just a traditionally distributed game or if we would go to Kickstarter. I think there's some really cool things you could do with that game on Kickstarter. But I love that game. It is not it, though. AF said, come to Montreal convention or overall Canadian convention. Yeah, I'd love to. Again, 2022 is probably going to be our more consistent convention year. So who knows what will happen in 2022. I suspect the state of the world will be in a different place when it comes to the pandemic by then as well. And so I expect most conventions to be back operating pretty regularly for the most part next year, next summer especially. So I'd love to make it to Canada. I've never been to Canada, just in general, as much as I have always wanted to. Just never happened. Church is in the chat saying convention season is going to be great. Yeah, I agree. And then Cy followed up and said, yeah, it looks really cool. Speaking of Kingslayer. I'm glad you think so. Everyone go check out Kingslayer. All right. Oh, I didn't answer the last part of that question. How do you feel about the interest in the medium? I think the interest in tabletop games is as strong, if not stronger than it has ever been. I think, in fact, the pandemic has brought people to the medium rather than push them away from it. I think people had too much screen time. I think people wanted to get away from screens in general. I think people were trapped inside with their housemates, whomever that might be, friends, family, significant others, whomever. They were trapped inside, not a lot to do, wanted to get away from screens, said, all right, how else can we unite? How else can we come together? How else can we do something fun that doesn't involve looking at a TV or a computer screen? And I think they said, well, board games. Sure, let's do that. And I think that's part of why why this industry had such a big year last year, despite everything going on. I think that's why Kickstarter projects continued to perform extremely well on the platform, despite all that was going on. So I think if anything, the pandemic actually drove up interest in the tabletop scene, that's great for this industry. That's great for this industry. It's great for designers. It's great for publishers. And ultimately it's great for players, for customers. Dark Soccer in the chat said, "Yeah, come to Canada, absolutely. I hope to." Real Bean said, "Oh yeah, board games really pulled people together in 2020. And there were so many family members and small friend groups that would pop into the store looking for stuff to play together. Being able to get a small, safe group of people together for one activity is honestly really refreshing." Yeah. So I'm glad, you were working at a store during this time, Beans. You saw the same thing that I was sort of seeing in a different way. You saw it firsthand. I was sort of watching it unfold online and that kind of thing, and through our Kickstarters, and just kind of making some assumptions about what I thought was going on there. So it's good to, that you were seeing that in a different way. And I think that's exactly what happened. So, all right, let's get to question 6. Would there be a project you guys worked on, or was there a project you guys worked on that you feel should have received more love, or you had wished would have received more love? Yeah. So despite the fact that I just stumbled through that question big time, I know what you're asking. And yes, a game that I wish got more love was Sinome Coliseum R, which was our first project. I mean, if you just go and look at Sinome's Kickstarter campaign, we were sub 300 backers. I think we were like 273 backers. But like once credit cards were actually like, processed, it wasn't 273. It was a lower number. It was closer to 250. So most people didn't play that game, which makes sense. And we were brand new. We had no marketing budget. I've talked about that in interviews that people have done with me before. I had a $0 marketing budget for Sinome Coliseum R. I was a social worker when I put together LionWing, and so I was still a social worker in the summer of 2018. And if you know anything about social workers, you know that we don't make any money. So I had no marketing budget for that game. I had just had a kid. They had just started daycare, so I'm like putting out daycare costs, just regular kid costs of buying stuff, doctor's appointments, that kind of thing, on top of my house payment and bills and all of that. I had no money to be putting into a marketing budget. Even if I had a marketing budget, I don't even know what I would have done with it. That's how clueless I was. I mean, it literally was one of those things where I was like, I want to start this localization company. I had come from localization, yet for a hot minute there, I was doing localization and social work. I shouldn't even say for a hot minute. I was doing those two things for years, localization at night, social work during the day. So I remember I started the company and I was like, I want to do this. I want more people to play Japanese games. I want to introduce Japanese games to the Western market. I think that there's probably a market for this. Oh, here's the game that I really like. Sinome. This is a great first project. It's pretty small. The ask will be pretty small as well. So great Kickstarter game. Designers were on board with creating extra content. Everything just sort of lined up. And I was so clueless that I was like, all right, so I'm just going to put this on Kickstarter and then people are just going to back it, right? Like they'll just find me. They'll find Sinome. That's how it's going to work. And, fortunately it did work that way in a very, very small sense. 273 people found us. A whopping 273 people found us. So like no one's played Sinome. And certainly we had some retail sales and we still have people picking up the game. Just had an order 2 nights ago. So, I mean, as we've gotten more popular, I've seen an influx in copies of Sinome sold. But still, most people aren't going into our back catalog and saying, oh, what's this game? Oh, this looks interesting. Yeah, okay, I'll try that. So that's a game that I wish would have gotten more love. It's a really light, casual, fun party game. There's dice chucking, there's card playing, there's variable player powers. There's a lot of cool stuff happening in that game. No one knows about it though, which is unfortunate. Would I like to do something with Sinome in the future? Yes, I would like to sort of reintroduce Sinome in a different way. I don't know what that way would be. Additional content, new art, chunkier packaging, something to that effect. But that's the one where it's like, wow, I wish more people played that game because it's just fun. It's just really fun. Most people that I've talked to who have played the game have remarked like, it's just silly fun. And it most definitely is. Bayonetta 3 cross Sinome. Yeah, I'll talk to Platinum and see if they're game. Someone in the chat said, I skipped it because it's a light party game with dice. That's why people skip it. That hits a very specific market. And most of the time, people looking for a light party game that has dice chucking involved typically aren't looking for the anime aesthetic to go along with it. They're looking for something, way more family friendly. Now, Sinome is like super, super family friendly, but they're looking for something that like the family's going to know or immediately recognize. And most families aren't going out and buying a game for like their family that consists of 3 kids ages 6 to 11. They're not going out and like trying to find an anime game, like that's just not happening. And so the target demo for that game is pretty small. It's pretty niche, and we're already a niche company, but that Sinome is like the niche of the niche. Still, even though it's a light party game with dice chucking, it does that genre extremely well. Now, if you don't like the genre, you just don't like the genre, and that's the way it is. But if you are interested in that genre, I think Sinome does it better than a lot of games. So, yeah, I don't even... Someone in the chat said, no, they want King of Tokyo. And I was initially going to say, yeah, but actually, I don't even think they want King of Tokyo. I mean, I don't know who's buying King of Tokyo. I know a lot of people buy King of Tokyo. I don't know if it's families. I don't know if it's families looking for a light dice chucker. I think they're probably going to look for something with an even friendlier theming. That being said, King of Tokyo's a rad game. Someone in the chat, Real Bean, said, real talk though, Sinome is really good vibes. It is. It just is. It's so fun. And I mean, I used the word silly before. That's like the best word to describe it. It's so ridiculously bonkers and silly that like, it's so endearing that even if you don't like the game, it's like the art is just hilarious. And when we were putting together the Kickstarter extras for Sinome, the designers were like, hey, why don't you design something? Like give us references, like create the concept and then we'll turn it into something, right? And I was like, sure, I will. Yes, I will gladly do that. So it was very cool that they let me do that. And so what I came up with was a pro wrestler. And so like if you backed the game, if you backed the Kickstarter and you got the promo card, you got yourself a really awesome pro wrestler character in Sinome Coliseum. And it's so silly. Now, it sounds like that character would not fit in with Sinome, and it totally doesn't. And at the same time, it totally does. Anyway, enough of Sinome talk. Next question. Does LionWing have some sort of exclusive with a board game company in Japan to be some sort of official publisher for outside Japan? No, not at this time. We don't. I'd love to be that company for a Japanese publisher or Japanese design circle, but we're just not there yet. I mean, if you think about it, we've got, 4 games under us? 5 if you count Testament, but, we're not even the ones selling Testament. So you need more than a handful of games under your belt to instill enough confidence in a Japanese company to say, we want you to be our designated publisher for the Western world. That's a big jump for anyone. It's an especially big jump for Japanese companies who tend to be more reserved and conservative when it comes to that kind of thing and tend to be very protective of their properties, rightfully so. So you've got to have a bit of a catalog, and the catalog's got to be deeper than, 4 or 5 games. But I certainly would love, love, love to be that. Yeah, I would love to be that. That being said, I don't even know, even though I would love to be that, I don't know if there's anyone out there who would want that kind of partnership. I think about like ArcLight. Now, it's probably not fair to talk about ArcLight just because they're so huge. But like, would ArcLight ever want to just go through one publisher? Probably not. That's pretty limiting, because even if you're the company in charge of publishing all the English editions of that game, you as only one company can only produce so many products. Whereas for them, they're trying to get as many of their products signed to a licensing deal as possible and get as many to the market as possible. And so if they go with one, I mean, what are you going to do? Be able to get out 4 or 5 of their titles in a year? Well, why would they do that when they could pump out through multiple English publishers 10 titles, 12 titles? You know what I mean? So it's a tough sell in many regards, because you do have to have a good track record and a good history. And then you also have to create an enticing enough negotiation to say, hey, don't worry about all these other companies that you could push products out to that could then sell those games and you can make money off those games. Just come to us and we'll be able to have half of the output. Like that's a hard sell. Still, I would love to be that. It could probably work for a smaller sort of an indie company, an indie-based publisher or indie-based designer who kind of like gets through games pretty quickly, but they're not going to like pick up, multiple licensing deals through multiple companies, that kind of thing. I think it could probably work in that regard. But even then, you've got to have a pretty good angle, and you've still got to have the track record. No matter how small, a company is that you're working with, they still want to see that they can trust all of their work with you. So question 8. In the previous LionWing Talks, you mentioned that to work on a project, you have to love it and feel connected to it. Is there a genre or type of board game you're most tempted to work on? For instance, is working on a card game more appealing than working on a dice-based game? Yeah, so I love card games. It doesn't really matter what kind of card game. I like games that are card driven. I just do. I like traditional board games too. I like tabletop RPGs, as I've talked about. I like miniatures, wargaming. I like it all. I love card-based games. And so I will say, like, very, very, very dice-dependent games are not for me. I don't get like a ton out of like a bunch of dice chucking. I say that as a 40K player, and like all that game is dice chucking. But generally speaking, that's not a genre I go to. Worker placement isn't like a huge genre that I go to. Now, I love like Kuro's worker placement games. I don't know, maybe I'm just a Kuro fanboy and I like anything he puts out. But generally speaking, Kuro worker placement games aside, I don't like. I'm not drawn to that genre as much. Definitely, if someone puts in front of me like a good worker placement game, like I'm gonna play it. It's not like I'm like vehemently opposed to the worker placement genre at large. It just tends to be like the genre that I would go to last. Like if you set 5 games in front of me and they all looked like my kind of game, and amidst those 5 games was a worker placement game and then a bunch of other games, so long as there wasn't a dice game, I'd probably pick the worker placement last. So I like card games. I like battle card games a lot. Obviously with Embryo and Gun and Gun, and then, kind of a soft confirmation that we've got at least one more coming in the next year and a half. So like, I really like that. I really like co-op games. I mean, that's why we did Testament and Wild Hunt Festival, despite the fact that they share similarities. So I feel really connected to battle card games and co-opers, like really, really connected. Especially co-opers where I can like dig into a story, and especially co-opers who either have a really strong story established and we can go through and we can translate that and and be like the lore keepers in that regard, or like Testament, a co-opper who doesn't have a ton of story, but the designers say, hey, you can write all the story you want for it. I don't care. I really like that just because I enjoy writing. But so those genres like are my favorite. Yeah, just don't put like a dice, like a heavy dice game in front of me. I like some, like for instance, getting back to Kuro, I like some of Kuro's dice games. Holy Grail is really fantastic. Hokkaido is really fantastic, and those are dice manipulation games. And typically, I hate dice manipulation games, but those games do the mechanics really well of dice manipulation, and they've got enough going on elsewhere outside of the dice manipulation to keep it very interesting. So we'll set those as like the exception to the rule, but yeah, yeah. Again, I don't like hate any genre. I will play any genre, but again, if you put a bunch in front of me, those are the ones that I'm going to choose last, probably. Next question, question 9. Are the people helping you out mostly employees or contractors? Contractors for the most part, though, as I mentioned before, I tend to use the same ones. So in some ways, some of those folks sort of feel like employees, and I think they too feel like employees. When you're small, when you're as small as LionWing is, contractors is really the only approach that makes sense. I mean, unless you come upon some sort of investor who's willing to front you a bunch of money, or if you're someone who is going to take the risk, take the gamble of, taking out a huge loan. Barring those two instances, contractors make the most sense in every regard. So, do you question 10, do you produce the goodies for tourneys or and other rewards when you produce the game, or are they a separate run afterwards as you need them? Yeah, so they're a separate run after the fact, and that is for a variety of reasons. The primary one being kind of wanting to hear what people want, wanting to hear what people want more of when it comes to tournaments that you're going to run. And it also gives you time to focus on creating that content. I mean, Kickstarter, the Kickstarter life is such a rat race. It's just like constant motion. You're ever moving forward in a Kickstarter before it launches, while it's live, but most certainly after the campaign is done. You're so worried about getting your Kickstarter extras taken care of. You're making sure that the game is tight and it's been cleaned up and it's in a place to print. You're so worried about coordinating with the printer, getting proofs, sending back feedback, making sure your product looks exactly the way it needs to look. You're so worried about scheduling freight shipping, the freight being picked up, where the freight is on the water, when it's going to arrive at port, if it's going to get through customs okay, how you're then going to get it from the port to your fulfillment center, how fast is your fulfillment center going to get to your product to be able to inventory it and to send it out to backers. And then you're worried about, are the games going to make it to backers as they should, on time, without damage? And then you're worried about, are people finally going to like the product when they get it in their hand? Then you're worried about, how do I support the product post-launch? Can I support the product? Can I produce additional content? For us, we also worry about, can we run contests? Can we run tournaments? Can we engage folks that way? Can we create and release DLC? How are we going to release DLC? Well, we have to go through a digital platform. All right, now we got to make the DLC, and then I got to package the DLC, and then I've got to send out the DLC. And so you're just constantly worrying about something that, amidst all of that, especially up until the games get delivered to backers, you don't have a lot of time to be thinking, all right, so, what kind of alternate promo card am I going to create for that tournament that I haven't fully fleshed out yet that's going to happen 6 months down the line? Like, that is not the top priority in that whole process. The top priority is making sure that the core game is what backers paid money for. and making sure that every step along the way goes off as close to accordingly as humanly possible. So for us, all of that stuff has, is, and will be, for the most part, created after the fact through a separate printer. Question 11. Are your coworkers interested in showing up during LionWing Talks at some point? Yes, indeed. Yes, they are. So if you go back to LionWing Talks 2.5, I brought on the graphic designer of Embryo Machine, and we talked about what it was like to localize Embryo Machine from mostly a graphic standpoint, but also just kind of like a text standpoint. We walked folks through why we made the decisions we made when it came to changing certain names, changing certain things about the game, not changing names or not changing certain things about the game. We walked through that whole process. His name was Tyler, and he was the same graphic designer who I worked with on Sinome, and he'll be a graphic designer on some of our future projects as well. And then if you were with us during the Gun and Gun campaign, you saw that Winona and I did a stream where we talked about how we localize Gun and Gun and all of the decisions that went into the English version of Gun and Gun. So there's a precedent there. Clearly, I like to do that kind of thing, and I want to do more of it. I'd like to bring on more specifically the translators that we work with, the editors that we work with. I work primarily with 2 translators and primarily with 1 editor. I'd like to bring them on. I think one of our translators, Sam, would be a great guest. He is well known in the translation scene in both board games and video games. Worked with a lot of Sony properties, worked with a ton of board games that you've played, without a doubt you've played. So I would love to bring him on specifically, but I'd like to bring Eli on as well. I'd like to bring Tyler back. I'd like to bring Winona back. In fact, Winona and I will be coming back because she and I are working together on the summer Kickstarter. There is going to be an interview happening with the designer of the summer Kickstarter project. So yeah, we're going to be bringing on more and more folks. We'll also be bringing on just some guest hosts that aren't part of the LionWing team or are a part of the LionWing team, like in a different way. As I've mentioned to Beans and Sin, I'd like to have them on the show as well at some point. So yeah, that's definitely something that I want to do. Looking at the chat here, I see Af has a question. Oh, so we are getting a promo card for the G&G tourney. Is that right? Not for this coming tournament. This coming tournament is a more casual tournament, but for the virtual league, we've got some cool stuff lined up for you. Sai in the chat said, I recently watched that episode. It was cool. I'm assuming you're talking about episode 2.5 with Tyler. Assuming you are. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. So I'll continue to do that kind of thing. Okay. Question 12. Are your contracts set to expire after a certain time? Are there any concerns that LionWing might not be able to maintain a catalog of staples or evergreen games because of expiring contracts? Yeah, so all contracts in the entertainment industry have an expiration date. All of them. That's just the way it goes. But there are also almost always renewal clauses in those contracts as well. So those 2 industry-wide practices aren't going anywhere, of having an expiration date, but also having the ability to renew the contract for the same amount of years as was indicated in the original contract. And those things aren't going anywhere because they're in the best interest of everyone involved. They're in the best interest of the designers to have expiration dates. They're in the best interest of publishers to have expiration dates, because the last thing you want as a designer is to have a publisher who sells your game, but clearly doesn't give a shit about actually selling it. Or they care about selling the game for the first month it hits store shelves and then they never talk about it again. You don't want that. On the flip side, as a publisher, you don't want to be locked into some contract that is a contract in perpetuity if you release the game and it either doesn't sell or people don't like it. You want to have an escape hatch. Now, hopefully you've done your homework enough and you've done your market research enough to know what people want and don't want. But like everyone makes a bad decision, here and there when it comes to scouting games. Like that's just the way it goes. It's not like if I scout a bad game, it's kind of like, well, when is that going to happen? Like which game is going to be the one that doesn't resonate with people? So that expectation is sort of built in, or at least it should be built in with anyone who runs a company or is scouting games for a company. So in hopefully those rare instances when you miss scout and a game doesn't perform super well, you don't want to be locked into selling that game forever. So it really, expiration dates are in the best interest of everyone. Because if the relationship's going well, if the game is selling, the designer's happy, the publisher's happy, well then you're gonna renew the contract. Most of the time you've got a clause in your contract that says the contract will auto renew for another 3 or 5 years, unless there is a written notice or a written notification from the designer or the publisher to the other party that they will not be renewing the contract. So if you're happy and everything's going well, no one's even going to talk about the renewal. It's just it's gonna roll over, and then boom, you're in it for another 3 or 5 years. And 3 or 5 years tends to be the expiration on most contracts in this industry. You sign a licensing deal typically for 3 years, sometimes 5 years. And then your renewal will hit on whatever year that you indicated in your initial contract. So if you negotiated a 3-year licensing contract on the auto renewal, it'll renew for another 3 years, unless they ask, all right, let's do a renewal, but let's do a 1-year renewal, and then at the end of that 1-year renewal, we'll do another sort of taking stock of where things are at, and if that works, we'll do another 1-year renewal, and that'll just continue going on and on and on for as long as you need it to. So, okay. Question 13. So I've seen other companies place a complexity rating on the box with their board games. From what I've seen, only Sonoma Coliseum had something similar with the 10 minutes to learn time. Is there a reason why you're not doing this? Yeah, strictly to declutter the box. I don't like clutter boxes. I hate going to my game store and I see a box and I look at it and there's just shit all over the place. It's like there's icons, there's words, there's assets, there's logos, there's company logos, there's designer logos, there's a SKU, there's a 3D render of a game setup. There's text effects, there's special effects, there's graphical effects. Like, no, stop. And so one of the ways that I declutter a box is I take out the stuff that's not essential. In my experience, the learn time is not essential, not for us. The other stats have to be there. Like, you definitely want to have how many players your game supports somewhere on your box, right? You definitely want to have the length of time it takes to play the game somewhere on the box. And then you have to, you literally have to have the ages, the age range for your game. What's the minimum age? And that comes down to a components thing and a choking hazards thing. So like that information has to be there. You don't have an option. The other 2 bits of information don't have to be there, but they should be there. The complexity rating, it's a luxury. If maybe your box isn't super cluttery and you're like, it won't really add to or make the box any more cluttery if I just throw in this one other bit of iconography and some text. Like, okay, sure, go for it. But that's not how I work. I never found it to be very beneficial with Sinome. No one ever remarked about it being helpful. No one ever said like, oh yeah, I'm so glad, that was there. So it was like, all right, in the interest of decluttering, let's just take out this. Now that doesn't mean that I'm like strictly opposed to it. I don't want to give that impression. And that doesn't mean like I wouldn't do it again at some point. But I don't think it's really necessary. Like if you like a game, you're going to buy the game. if you like the way the game looks, if you like the premise or the copy on the back of the box, or if you come to the shop and you've already watched videos or reviews or you read reviews or whatever, like you're going to buy that game whether it says it can be learned in 10 minutes or 50 minutes. If you want a game that badly, you're going to buy it most of the time. There will always be exceptions where someone's like totally put off by a complexity rating. They're at their, their local game shop and they see a game for the first time and they're like, oh yeah, this looks like my kind of game. Then they see the complexity rating and they're like, oh, it takes 90 minutes to learn. Yeah, no, not for me. Like that happens. Don't get me wrong, that happens. It just doesn't happen all that often. Like usually if you see a game and you want it, you're going to get it and you're going to buy it. And the complexity rating isn't going to be the thing that scares you off. It's going to be something else. So I see we've got lots of folks talking in the chat. So let me see if I can catch up with all of this and also provide decent audio in the meantime. All right. Someone's having some issues with some buffering. Sorry about that. Yeah. It's a 1440 60 stream. I apologize. Sometimes that causes things to break on the user's end. But I do that because I like the video quality. Someone said, yeah, when I see a box that has like the 15 awards it won on it and a bunch of other useless information, it makes it less appealing. I agree. Like never once have I gone into my shop looking for a game and I pick up the box and it says, won this award. Never once in my entire life. Maybe I'm the outlier here and I very well could be. So don't get me wrong. Never once have I said, oh yeah, okay, I'm buying this game because it won an award. It's never happened to me. I've never cared that much about what someone else said about a game to say, oh, it won an award. This is the game for me. So again, that's one of those visual aids that for LionWing doesn't need to be there. Oh, hey, it's Jinxie from the Discord. Hey, Jinxie, thanks for joining us. Someone said, I want my boxes to look nice for display. Me too. That's why I like very straightforward box art and box organization. Let's see here. Someone said, Fry Guy in the chat. Hey, Fry Guy, hadn't seen you until now. I have a weird gun localization question. Did you ever consider changing hits to something else? I know some fighting games chose to do that for some reasons. Yeah, so we did consider changing hits for a moment. We never considered it strongly enough to create a list of other things that we would use instead of the hits verbiage. So we clearly didn't think that it was a problem enough to go ahead and think about oh, well, what else could we call it? It was one of those things where we were like, all right, so, when I'm first going through a game, especially as the localization editor, I go through and I'm identifying all the problem terms first. And I'm making a running tally of all right, here are all the things, here's all the verbiage, here's all the vocabulary, the terminology that could be problematic. Could be. When I review it more deeply, I might come to find out that no, not problematic at all. But even if I think for a second that it could be problematic, I'm going to put it on my list. And that was one of the things that I put on my list when I was going through Gun for the first time, since I was the primary editor for that game, was hits. Do we want to change that? And I remember writing it down, because I still use pencil and paper for that kind of thing. But I remember writing it down in my book with hits in quotes with a question mark. And I remember taking it to the team, my list of concerns. And that was one of those things where I presented it to the team and everyone was like, okay, yeah, on to the next thing. So we didn't give it a whole lot of thought because at the end of the day, I liked that phrasing. And I'm not sure that it ever got any deeper than that. I'm not sure beyond my liking it that we ever decided to keep it beyond just my liking it, beyond my saying, yeah, no, that I like that verbiage. I think that makes sense here. That's also how Keep Dry had translated it. So, Ken from Keep Dry. He's a translator by trade. That's what he does for his day job. And so he translated Gun and Gun. And so he was also very specific about the terminology that was chosen. And so that was one of those ones where he clearly had chosen that for a reason. And I remember talking with Ken about not hits, but some other stuff. And I'd say, so, walk me through kind of what was your thought process behind choosing this word to describe this thing. And he always had an explanation. Ken is the type of guy, I don't know if you saw the interview that he and I did with TCG Scrubs, but you could probably surmise from that interview that Ken is a very meticulous guy. Ken is the type of guy who doesn't do things by accident. It's not him. That's just not how he is. And so some of those terms he specifically chose, and he would tell me why he chose those terms and would emphasize that he liked certain terms. I don't remember if hits was on that list, but it was one of those things where we ultimately decided, yeah, this hits works for us. All right. On to question 14. Have there been board games that you want to localize but aren't worth the trouble for one reason or another? Yeah, though it's mostly just licensed stuff or really, really, really small stuff. Where I'm like, oh, I personally would love that, but I don't think I can do anything with that. Like, I don't know if there's an audience for that. I don't know if there's any money in that. Like, we certainly can't do a Kickstarter for it. So, but most of those projects where I'm like, oh, I'd love to do that, but oh, that juice is not worth the squeeze, are licensed based things. So in the chat a few days ago, Mox was talking about True Marine Show 3, and True Marine Show is, it's one of those games that like, oh, that's something that I'd like to do something with, but I'm not jumping through all those licensing hoops to make like pennies, which is what I would make after I paid everyone their licensing fee. So that's not worth the trouble. And then there have been some other things. There have been some Toho games that I think are really cool that I'm like, I don't want to deal with that. Even though it's like a license-free sort of IP, it's still like, I don't know if that run's worth the jump. Question 15. Is a community creativity contest also coming for Gun and Gun like we had for Kratia? Maybe. So it depends a little bit on Keep Dry, honestly. So Keep Dry is very protective of their stuff. And as someone was mentioning in the chat, I think just earlier today, Gun and Gun is their most popular property. They've got Core Connection, and Core Connection is very popular too. Gun and Gun has a certain degree of fandom, though, behind it. And so because of that, and just because of it is who they are, they're very protective of those types of things. So unlike Kratia, where Ramos-san and Liner Note were like very open to doing whatever, like whatever we suggested, Ramos-san was like, oh yeah, that's cool, let's do that. Like, he was such a chill dude to work with. Not saying Keep Dry is not chill, but they just approach their game and their property very differently than someone like Liner Note. And so it may not be as easy to create fan-led content because they may not be down with that. I haven't done a lot of pushing on that front. Not to mention, there are things happening with Gun and Gun that won't happen with something like Wild Hunt Festival. There's not going to be a virtual league for Wild Hunt Festival. So, the fan contest for Wild Hunt Festival was a way to keep people involved, have a little bit of fun with something that we won't be able to revisit like on a weekly basis like we will with Gun and Gun or Embryo Machine or any of our competitive games. And so I've always felt like Gun and Gun hasn't really needed that type of thing right now. That doesn't mean I'm not open to it. Clearly, I like that kind of thing. We did it with Wild Hunt Festival. I've mentioned that we're going to do it with Embryo Machine. So fan contests are my thing. I love them, but they have to make sense. And I haven't decided yet if it makes sense for Gun and Gun or not. If I hear enough sort of support for it, or I even draw my own conclusion that, yeah, it is worth it, then we got to clear it by Keep Dry. And if they then say, yeah, it's worth it, all right, then we'll do something with it. But I don't know anything beyond what I've just mentioned about that. I think there's some cool stuff you could do with a fan contest. A lot of cool stuff you could do. There's a lot of meat on the gun and gun bone, gameplay wise, lore wise, cool products wise. There's a lot that you could do there, and so fan led stuff in that regard would be awesome. Okay. Question 16. Do you have any plan? Yeah. Do you have plans to bring hype up again for karate as we get closer, like we're currently doing for gun and gun? Probably not to the same extent as gun and gun, simply because there's a little less you can do with a cooperative boss battler as opposed to like a battle card game. But we will likely be running some kind of Wild Hunt Festival event. I already have in my head what I think that event's going to be, but I can't commit to saying we are or we are not going to do something like that until I feel certain that I'm ready to say that. Because I never want to like say something and then, walk it back, especially when it comes to like doing something cool like an event. So right now I will say we will likely do that event. And I will say right now that I already have the idea for the event in my head and what it would be. But now it's really kind of sitting down, working out the details, and then presenting it to folks. So, see you, Jinxie. Question 16. We're getting to the end here. Do you have plans? Oh, sorry. Question 17. Can we get some sort of achievement every time we beat the number of questions for a LionWing Talks episode? Yes. The achievement will be you get it announced that you beat the last show's questions. There's your achievement. Question 18. Will we be getting this about Embryo Machine? Will we be getting the advanced decks for the 4 mechs that are on Tabletop Simulator right now? So right now, right now there are 2 mechs on Tabletop Simulator with just their basic decks. There's also an advanced version of all mechs in Embryo Machine, which means there are advanced decks for those advanced mechs. Yes, we will be introducing those advanced decks to the Tabletop Simulator version of Embryo Machine. Not right now. That's not my focus at this moment. For Embryo Machine, when it comes to Tabletop Simulator, the thing that I'm focused on right now is getting the next 2 mechs on there and also fixing a couple things that are broken with the Tabletop Simulator version of Embryo Machine. There's like an issue right now where I can't remember exactly, but you pick up a component and like if you drop it, it just drops to the table like forever. And you've got to reset the entire game. You got to reset the board. So that kind of thing needs to be fixed in addition to getting those 2 new mechs on Tabletop Simulator before we move into the advanced stuff. So speaking of those 2 new mechs that we're going to be putting on the Tabletop Simulator version of Embryo Machine in my next Embryo Machine update. So for the May update, which should be happening next week, I'm going to include a survey for the next 2 mechs that people want to see in the Tabletop Simulator version of the game. So that's how you'll get to, provide feedback on what you want to see next. And the 2 mechs that take the highest votes will be the ones that we put in there. So simple as that. And then the last question, how many questions can you answer in a single episode? 47. All right. We have made it through. We have made it through the Q&A section. Without a doubt, our longest Q&A section yet. The most questions we've ever had. Thank you, everyone, for submitting those questions. It was awesome. I love to see it. I'd love to see us get close to, meet, or exceed the same number of questions for next week's LionWing Talks. So the challenge is on to you folks who are watching and listening right now or on playback. Let's try to beat it next week too, because the more questions that we get, the more content we have, the more we can dig into these topics. Someone said 1 hour and 15 minutes. Yeah, that's how long it took. Yeah. So, and then Af in the chat said they were all good questions, of course. Yes, they were some really good questions. All good questions. Last week we had great questions too. We have great questions every week, but certainly like folks are stepping up their game lately, especially the last two shows. So keep it up. All right. project updates. Testament. So I've got literally nothing new on Testament other than the fact that the street date is exactly 2 weeks away. So I don't know what else is going on with Testament besides that. I would imagine people are going to start getting those copies sometime very soon, which is going to be cool. I hope we get some new folks in the Discord looking to talk about Testament, because I'm always down to talk about Testament. Okay. Wild Hunt Festival update. So, sorry, my allergies are killing me. My nose is completely stopped up at this point. I think I started the show and I could breathe out of one of my nostrils, and now I can't breathe out of either. So if I sound especially nasally, that's why. Wild Hunt Festival update. We got confirmation that all fulfillment will begin the first week of June. However, sort of surprisingly, fulfillment for Australia will begin the last week of May. So folks in Australia will likely get their copies of Wild Hunt Festival before folks in any other region in the world. I don't know how it worked out like that, but it did. We will be sending out an email and an update this week or next week, asking folks to that they'll have like one last opportunity to lock in their address to make any changes before we close down that ability to do so. The end is in sight at this point. When I got the email from Petra saying fulfillment begins at Fun Again first week in June, tell your folks to lock in their addresses within the next week or so. That's when I know it's the real deal. That's when I know shit's happening and the games are coming. So that's really exciting. Really exciting. Yeah. I'm so stoked. I can't wait for people to play Wild Hunt Festival. Both it and Testament are boss battlers, but they approach the genre very differently, just even in their presentation. And I'm not talking about their character designs. Clearly those are very different, but just how the game is presented, how the information's presented on cards. It's just, Wild Hunt Festival is so cool. I'm so excited for people to play that game. Someone in the chat said, I thought Bradley was still sick from episode 6 or something. Yeah, no. No, this is allergies. Fun times. Especially living in Cincinnati. So if you live anywhere, in or around Cincinnati, you know that we sort of exist in a giant valley. And this is people joke about this. Even my ENT is always like, Bradley, you were born in the wrong city. You live in the wrong city to have the allergies and the chronic sinusitis that you have. You live in a place where all of the allergens collect and just sit because we sit at the bottom of a hill or the bottom of a valley. It's yeah, all right. Someone in the chat, is Sin said, might be a bit of boss battle overload. Yeah, so you would think that, and perhaps if you're just someone who can't play this within the same genre too much, you can't have too many games in the same genre and playing those games in close proximity to one another. Yeah, it might be boss battle overload, but the games approach the genre so gameplay wise very, very differently. So I think you'll find out that when you play Testament, you can go to Wild Hunt Festival and it's going to feel like a different game. Even though on paper, you've got characters and you're fighting a boss and that's the game, how the two games get to that goal and how they execute on that vision feel drastically different. All right. So the big news of tonight. Gun and Gun. We've been pushing Gun and Gun hard lately. First off, if you missed LionWing Plays on Monday, our other streaming show that happens every Monday night at 9 p.m. EST on Twitch, plug. We added the last gunner and the last gun of the core set to the tabletop simulator version of Gun and Gun. So you now have Notori and her 3 skills, and Kasane, which is a shotgun, and Kasane's gun deck. So those 2 things are now in Tabletop Simulator. We did that because we wanted folks to have ample time to get in as many practice games as they wanted in preparation for our first Gun and Gun event. And that's what we're here to talk about. Tournament news. So, let's see here. Drunk Crunk Franken. I love that name. Can't believe you guys finally added Kiriko to the TTS mod. Yeah, no, Kiriko's been on the TTS version for a couple months. I think you're probably thinking of Notori, and that's who we added on Monday. So, tournament news. It's a joke. Gotcha. Tournament news. Okay, there we go. We've got our tournament logo. So, the tournament that'll be happening in May is on the screen right now. It's called Operation Bulletstorm. So, Operation Bulletstorm will be happening starting on May 17th. Operation Bulletstorm is going to be kind of a two-part tournament. You'll have 1 week starting on May 17th to play all of your round-robin games. So stage 1 of Operation Bulletstorm will be a round-robin game. And we've got all these rules typed up, and I'll bring those up here in a second. And then the winners of the round-robin will go into a bracket, and the bracket will be played on May 23rd, starting at 11 a.m. EST, which was the time chosen so that most time zones can participate. We've got prizes lined up for first, second, and third place, and we've got participation prizes. So let's talk about those. So first up, let's first. Let me pull up something here. Let's get to the sign up. So we've got a sign up form here. If I can pull them up, that is. Here we go. All right. So we've got our sign up. Now I'm going to drop this link in the Discord. I will pin it. I'll also be posting this along with a bunch of other information in Gun and Guns update, which I'll be posting either tomorrow or Friday. So we got to sign up here. It includes your name, your email, and your time zone. It's got a little bit of information here. Week 1, the round robin week, and then your week 2 bracket. So that should probably say May 17th. I guess it depends on if you identify as Sunday being the start of the week or Monday, and I typically go with Monday, nevertheless. So here's your sign-up form. Then we got some rules. So let me pull those up. And this is another thing that I'll be giving a link to. We've got our tournament rules here. 3 pages of rules. Pretty straightforward stuff. What if 20 people join the round robin? Well, looks like we're playing a lot of round robin games. I'm not going to go through all these rules right here because that'll be on all of you who want to participate. To read through these and to get acquainted with the rules and how things are going to flow. As Sin said, you are going to be seeded into multiple groups, and you'll have a week to play all of your matches. So yeah, as Sin said, even with 20 people, for instance, that would only be 4 groups of 5. So there you have it. And really, so you really have Sin and Beans to thank for setting up the tournament and working through all the particulars of the tournament. They championed this project themselves and got to work and put this thing together, and we're in a good place only because of them. So this tournament's going to work because of them. So give them a shout out when you get a chance. But they've been fantastic. Said I've come back just in time, it seems. Yes, you have. We're talking about the tournament. Operation Bulletstorm. Yes, great job, Sin and Beans. So the most important thing that I'll talk about right now, we'll talk about some prizes down here at the bottom if you're watching the screen. So everyone who participates is going to get something. So just by signing up and playing your matches, you're going to get a little treat. I mean, it's nothing big, but it is going to be an Operation Bulletstorm holographic sticker, something to commemorate, obviously, your participation in this tournament in specific. And I wanted it to be an Operation Bulletstorm branded sticker. That way you've got something specific to this tournament. Yeah, and it is it is double elimination, by the way. I think I just saw someone mention that in the chat. Oh, and Sin just said it too. So everyone's going to get a holographic sticker, a Gun and Emblazoned Operation Bulletstorm holographic sticker. In fact, let me just show you what that sticker is going to look like. Let's move this to the top. Boom. All right. So there's your sticker. I'm gonna rework a couple things on that, or I shouldn't say rework it. I'm gonna touch it up a little bit. I'm gonna put some stroke around some of those words so that they are more readable. But nevertheless, that is your holographic Operation Bulletstorm sticker. Everyone will get one of those. Now, you're gonna get something special though if you place first, second, or third. Second and third place, you're going to net yourself an Operation Bulletstorm t-shirt. So let's talk about what that t-shirt is. All right, so there's our t-shirt, the front of it anyway. There's a backside as well. So you can't see exactly what that reads because it's pretty small. But it is the tournament logo, the Operation Bulletstorm logo. Let's see. I think I've got that logo around here. There we go. Yep. It won't have the decorative background on the actual shirt. So the text itself will be pressed onto the shirt. And then we got a nice little shirt back as well. Let's get this baby up there. Boom. There's your shirt back. So, first, second, and third place will all get this t-shirt on top of their stickers, obviously. First place, however, as we see here, is going to get a little something extra, though. So you're going to get your shirt, but then you're also going to get a signed Gun and Gun production proof. You'll also get a special Discord designation title. And then, if you want, because not everyone will want this, but if you want, you can be a guest on, this show. And we will talk about, all things LionWing and anything else you want to talk about, because you'll be one of the guest hosts. So, this is a casual tournament. It's a fun tournament. We're saving the bigger prizes for the virtual league, but we still wanted to create some cool stuff for you. I think we've done that. I think the sign production proof will be really cool. I think that's a cool first place prize. You'll get to choose what the production proof is. Though I might limit it to something within your winning loadout, just because that kind of sounds cool. I mean, really having a signed proof of one of the gunners would be rad, but whatever. Anyway. So this takes place in 3 weeks? 1, 2. Yeah, so 2.5 weeks. That gives you 2.5 weeks to get acquainted with the game. The tournament is going to be double set Gun and Gun. So you're going to be able to have mirror matches, if it turns out that way. So, play whatever loadouts you want in the lead up to this. Get your practice in with whatever loadouts you wish to get practice in with, because you're going to be able to choose that loadout regardless of what your opponent chooses. Which, in most cases, people have not been able to play that style of gun and gun yet, because on the tabletop simulator version, you've only got one core set. That's going to change for the tournament, obviously. Overheat is not part of the tournament. No, we are not putting overheat on tabletop simulator anytime soon. We want overheat to be special, because at this point we've pretty much revealed like the entire game, and that's not exactly exciting when you finally get your like physical product in your hand outside of like having the game physically. We wanted to save a little extra for you to be excited about for once you get your actual backer rewards, and that's why we're holding out on overheat, because we want the first time for you to really experience overheat to be with your physical copies. That being said, there's also some surprises we snuck in with backer copies that we haven't talked about yet. Some subtle changes, some subtle additions, some other pack-in stuff that no one knows about yet. So that'll also kind of make the experience a little bit novel. But for this tournament, no overheat. Once the virtual league kicks off, yeah, overheat will be a part of that. So this is just core set gun and gun. Let's see here. Bonus loot hype. Yeah. Let's see here. Late pledge also get. Yes, late pledges get all the Kickstarter loot up until a point. So we are going to be closing late pledges as soon as the game exit mass production. We'll be closing the late pledge option. And then from there, if you still want to get in on Gun and Gun before it's actually on store shelves, you can pre-order it, but pre-ordering won't get you any of the Kickstarter extras. So there you have it. Yeah, on Tabletop Simulator, you can clone stuff. Yes, you can if you know how to do that. So that's Operation Bulletstorm. There'll be a little bit of narrative stuff around Operation Bulletstorm as sort of a setup for the tournament. Nothing too substantial, but you can look forward to that as well. We're not revealing that here tonight. But that'll also be a part of the process. Yeah, someone in the chat said, Af said in the chat, yeah, Fern and I already saved a loadout for 2 core sets. Yep. Yes, you can do that. All right. Let's see. What else do I got on? Gun and gun. Let's see. I think that's it there. Okay. I like how it would be cool if we could get back to, there we go. Thank you. Lost our logo. Fix that right quick. Okay. We have been keeping up. AF and Church in the chat have been keeping some stats on Gun and Gun. We're going to continue to utilize those stats. We'll be utilizing those stats throughout the tournament as well. We're going to have everyone who participates. We're going to have you log some stuff so that we have some statistics. So thanks, AF and Church, for that work that you've done so far. And let me get back to my show notes here. Okay. Af in the chat just mentioned theory crafting. And speaking of theory crafting, we are going to be releasing a video actually that Af put together last week on theory crafting. This was before Kasane and Notori got put into the tabletop simulator version. So it'll be a little outdated, obviously, but it's about a 30-minute video of where he talks about various cards, loadouts, that kind of thing. It's an awesome video. We're going to upload it on Friday, so you have a little weekend viewing there. In fact, we're going to try to do that more often, not just for Gun and Gun, but for any of our projects, community-driven content we want to be able to host on our channel. And so it might be one of those things that we brand as sort of a LionWing spotlight show or a LionWing community show. And it'll be specifically targeted toward community created content for one of our games. And that won't be like a regular show. We're not going to do that weekly. We're not going to do it bi-weekly. We'll do it just whenever it comes to us and whenever we've got folks who are interested in creating that kind of content for one of our games. But we will be doing it, even if it's not regular. And so this Friday, we'll sort of kick off that series. I haven't decided on the exact name of it just yet, but I will be assigning a name to it, just like we've got LionWing Plays and LionWing Talks. We'll have another one for our community show. Someone in the chat said, I'm very much a find one build and run it exclusively kind of a player. Would be great to see all the stats line up. Yeah, I tend to be that type of player too, for the most part. Some games I feel a little bit more inclined to branch out and try things, but generally speaking, I like to just find like one thing and then stick to it for a long time, and so that I know the ins and outs of that build or that deck as much as possible. And as Church said, that's what the spreadsheet's for. So theory crafting for the win. And yeah, Af has been, I think it was last night, right, Af? Af and Fry Guy did a theory crafting night just in the Discord chat, just with themselves. And so, if you're into that side of competitive games, definitely link up with one of them or Church or really anyone who's been actively involved in the gun and gun scene, because I think any one of us would be interested in helping you out there, or theory crafting with you, or playing with you, or whatever the case may be. So Sin Theory says they were at it for hours. I stopped in for a bit and it was cool. Yeah, that is cool. So that is Gun and Gun, Operation Bulletstorm. Kick it off in 2.5 weeks. We hope to see you all there. If you want some swag, definitely get in on it. I mean, at the very least, you'll get yourself a cool holographic sticker. Af said in the chat, you know what? After the LionWing talk, I can start playing to get everyone going. I can start a playing night to get everyone going. Yeah, that'd be cool. Whatever you guys want to do. All right, moving on to Embryo Machine. We are running really, really long, so I'm going to fast track the end of this show now. So we got our Garu miniature finished. I just got the finished render 2 days ago. So we're going to be showing off that miniature in May's update, which, again, like I said, I think is probably going to be next week. It wouldn't be later than the week after next week. So sometime in the next 2 weeks, you're going to get an Embryo Machine update. It's probably going to be next week. And there's going to be multiple things in that update, including that survey that I talked about before for the additional 2 mechs for the Tabletop Simulator version. But you're also going to be able to see the Garu miniature as well. And the Garu miniature looks rad. I mean, all of the miniatures look great. Our modeler is just good at what he does. And yeah, so it's cool to see Garu in 3D form. Yet again, I'm excited to get these to the table. So that leaves us only with doing the models for Zimmer and Tordahan. So we got 2 left. Then we're done. I think that's right. Maybe we already did Zimmer. I'm losing track of it all. I know we haven't done Tordahan yet. I'm super excited to see how Tordahan turns out. Just, if you remember, Tordahan is the one with the giant blade wings, like massive blade wings. So it'll be cool to see. It'll be cool to see that in miniatures for. And that's it, folks. That's it. That is it for episode 13 of LionWing Talks. It's been a long one. Thank you for hanging in there with me. We had a lot to cover tonight, a lot of great questions. Thank you again. A lot of good updates. I hope you all are excited about Operation Bulletstorm. I know that Sin and Beans have worked tirelessly to put this together for you guys. They're the real stars here. All I did was come in, I made some graphics and said what the prizes were going to be. Yeah, give them a shout out. And I'm excited to see this happen. I'm excited to see the first Gun and Gun event pop off. I've been waiting for this. I've been waiting for this day, like since I knew that LionWing was going to be publishing Gun and Gun. And so this will be a precursor to the virtual league. We're going to figure out, from this event, what works, what doesn't work, that kind of thing. And although we're going to attempt to try to use physical Gun and Gun for the virtual league, there's a possibility, a good possibility, I would say, that we'll move to Tabletop Simulator. But even outside of figuring out how it could work, how to utilize Tabletop Simulator in a tournament environment such as this, since LionWing has never done this thing, we'll have to work out some of the kinks here. But it'll be an opportunity for us just to see kind of what works as a Gun and Gun event and what maybe doesn't work. And so that'll only help the virtual league. So this tournament is going to serve multiple purposes, but the primary purpose is just to have fun with Gun and Gun and to get in some competitive games and to win some cool swag. So thanks everyone for sitting with me tonight. It's been about an hour and 40 minutes, maybe an hour and 45 minutes at this point. It's a long one, so much appreciated. You guys are the absolute best. And we'll do this again next Wednesday, at 9 p.m. EST on Twitch. I'll see you then. And don't forget about LionWing Plays, Mondays at 9. Take care.